Hello, Subsourian.
Hello, Jay.
Hello. Welcome. Welcome back, everybody. We had a couple weeks off here, and we're getting back. It's the StarCraft 2 Weekly Mutation. We weren't sure if we were going to make more videos of this, and we were still playing them, and we just decided, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, I had a bunch of people say, yeah, they're still recording these, right? It's like, no, we'd stopped until there would be good ones. And, of course, we come back on what I think is probably the easiest one. Back when this first launched, I'd actually ground this to get 100 wins because it's probably, in my opinion, the easiest one so far. Scorched Earth, Lava Burst, and Evasive Maneuvers on Void Thrashing, because Void Thrashing is not a particularly hard map.
Right.
But yeah.
I think I'm open to anybody here.
I'm gonna use this to boost my prestige, or my not prestige. Yeah, prestige on my Abathur. So I'm playing optimal or sub mastery Abathur.
I mean, that keeps it interesting, right? Rather than just blasting it with full mastery people.
True, but it is still Abathur, who's pretty
good.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Well, in that case, what if I did level 11 Karax?
All right, yeah, worth it. Honestly, it's still probably going to be pretty easy, but we'll see if we eat our words.
We'll see. Based on the comments on my 3-player co-op series, I'm really bad at this game, so you never know what's going to happen.
Exactly. You even had the most OP hero of all of HOTS.
Right.
Dora, I'm not going to try to pronounce
Dawadiru.
Dawadiru.
He became a meme all on his own. I don't think I pushed it.
No, old fatty infester is a meme to himself.
The beta infester.
God, I'm so happy they brought that back. I love that model.
Yeah. So I also figured, depending on the challenge of the mutations, we can use this as sort of a free-form half-hour-ish each week to just talk about whatever's going on, not primarily in the StarCraft world, but then also, whatever we want to talk about related to media.
Oh, I was going to say, we don't have much to talk about for it's going to be pretty...
Well, we were talking about Mass Recall before this, because I don't know if viewers know this, but I wouldn't say I'm technically on the Mass Recall team, but I am helping them with a big upcoming release that should be coming out near the end of the year here, and you and I talk about it quite a bit, because you have given a lot of really valuable testing feedback.
I yell about lore. I have very strong opinions on some changes to everyone's credit, I talked to Jones, who's like one of the leads of it, and he was surprisingly receptive to some very drastic changes that I did not expect to. So they are listening. They do care a lot. For all of my shaking fists, I do respect that team.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to do is get into like a gossipy thing about the Mass Recall team, but I think it's fair, because what I find interesting to talk about is like discussing about like some of the skin sets that you take issue with, because again, it's more about the fact that there's like canonical things with StarCraft. So it has nothing to do with the fact that these exist in the mod per se. It's more just like, they're there, so we could just, talk about them. I find it interesting.
Oh yeah, in terms of the skin sets I disagree with, or the ones that are out now, you mean?
Yeah, so I think, and I agree with you. I think the primary one is probably the Renegade Zerg, and probably they're called the Kali Protoss, right?
Yeah. The viewers of your XCOM stream will remember my Primal Zaz character for my Infinite Rage.
Right.
I'm not big on. So to the credit, the idea behind it was to kind of define factions with the skin sets they had available. Problem is they used Primal Zerg for the Renegade Zerg, which really doesn't jive particularly well, especially because there aren't too many Renegade units, or a lot of the old skin sets or old units like Defilers also just don't get skins, whereas some others do. So it's a little bit of a mess. You mentioned the Kali Protoss, where it's also 3 different skin sets meshed together: Purifier, Golden Age, and what's the other one? There was another one. I can't remember now.
Well, yeah, I think so. For me, the one that stands out is the fact that they're like Purifiers mixed in. It just seems kind of counter to the whole idea of. Right. It's more. Again, I don't want to get into why these were added or what have you. I understand it's more to provide these are optional things. But from a canonical perspective, I feel like it doesn't make as much sense because the purifiers were specifically known to be separate from. Ooh, it's Air Terran.
Oh god. Oh well, at least I can get the mine on the mines or the nests.
Splat.
Poof.
And then it's same with the Renegade Zerg, which primarily use the primal skin sets, which again, they exist as a separate skin set, but they were created as primal Zerg, and players will recognize them as such, which is why I don't think they function super great.
They're associated with the Haka at this point, and they just don't. Especially because they're a different skin set from the regular Overmind, and they're supposed to be kind of the last holdouts of the regular Overmind. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
I had other people who followed my stuff know I have a lot of complaints about a few of the cutscenes, like the UED shooting down civilians on Core Hall. But yeah, like I said, they're talking about fixing a lot of the stuff I've yelled about over the years. So good on them. They do listen.
Yeah. So we were mildly talking about this before we joined, but I would say Devil's Advocate counterpoint. And I guess you would just repeat what you had said, but for the stream, at the beginning of Assault on Core Hall, there's a cutscene where the UED, there's a rowdy group of civilians on Core Hall, and they're shouting like they're rioting, and then some UED Marines shoot them, and they flee. So,
and the funny thing with that scene, now that I'm thinking back and remembering, the animation they use for being rowdy is the same. Is their cheering animation?
I think it's the cheering. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like these guys are cheering yeah, you're the best UED, and then the UED just guns them down.
So I've known of your complaint about this for a long time, and so again, Devil's Advocate side of things is okay. It's not about the UED canon about how the UED is per se. It's about the fact that these are just military people in a situation where they don't know how to control the crowd, and they panic and they shoot them.
Yeah, it's a oh god, evasive maneuvers. I forgot that existed. That's annoying. Thank you.
Oh, yep. I can see why that's.
All right. I need to get designated anti-air and not my Ravager greed.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna make carriers.
That's smart.
But again, this is Devil's Advocate, right? But what I want to hear, because I've heard this complaint from you for a while, is what specifically is there that tells us that we should not accept the narrative that the UED would do this or wouldn't do this?
There's two major things, and currently it's because the arc they're going for in the comics with the UED, mostly with scavengers, is that now that Valerian's being all nice with the aliens, a lot of the civilian population is starting to be really receptive to the ideals of the UED and work with UED remnants in the sector for some. As of yet, they haven't really revealed the agenda. And while it doesn't necessarily contradict it, it gets a weird element when you start introducing the fact that do you remember when these guys just started mowing down civilians in the street because they looked down on us that much? When you have the sector civilians starting to work with them.
I see. Okay, I see. So it's more, yeah. So I guess you get the impression now from comics that are more current, where they talk about how the UED, it kind of looks back. I don't want to say, well, I guess I would say retcon, that the UED brought ideals that the general populace may have actually liked.
Well, now they it's more of an idea. It's working with the ideals that Valerian now is at peace with the aliens, and those that had lost people in the war, or bought Arcturus's rhetoric, hook, line, and sinker, are now wait, that's not cool. We all lost people to the Zerg. Why are we buddy with them?
Right.
And now the UED's hey, do you want security from these aliens? Or that's kind of the impression.
Oh, I see. Yeah. And that kind of plays back into the whole idea that, in a way, I guess I'll push back a little bit in the sense that the UED was kind of two-faced in the sense that they use that fear to drive the populace, which I wouldn't take it at face value that they wouldn't just shoot people to get what they need.
Yeah.
right? Because it was basically propaganda with the whole like they may have been pushing to Earth, you know?
Yeah, I mean they're objectively evil, certainly. So, and I've stressed this too. There is nothing that says the UED like wouldn't shoot some. That is perfectly in their nature to shoot civilians. Some people think I'm like, they're fascists. They should be, which you're right. They should. The issue then becomes in future works for people who've only played Mass Recall. It gets weird that people aren't mentioning the fact that when they occupied Core Hall, they were butchering civilians.
Gotcha.
Now, granted, they could introduce that to canon, and it would fit perfectly fine. But it also comes down to like, what's the role of Mass Recall? Is it to add those little tidbits, or is it to tell the story in canon as is? And it's a fan project. So
that makes sense, though. Yeah, no, I understand.
You don't have to listen to me. But and there's other small things, but most of it's like 90% of the stuff is like, oh, they shouldn't be at this location, which really that shouldn't break your immersion at all.
Okay, well, again, I'm the reason that I would purposefully pose the question is, number one, I was curious,
yeah,
and number two, like mostly to like give the platform to explain it, because again, we're talking about StarCraft.
Oh, certainly.
So I'm not trying to
very, very wonderful comments. Actually, lately comments have been great about lore. I haven't had any issues.
Good.
Oh God.
I'm gonna.
I forgot how annoying evasive maneuver is.
I thought you said this one was super easy.
I thought I said so too, but I guess it still is, but I guess I'm
I guess it still is.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get that Karax Prestige leveled up where my units are cheaper.
Yes.
One of these days.
That one is really solid. Get my Brutalist back up.
I'm rebuilding carriers. I'm just gonna back up for a moment.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to gather this biomass. I think with 2 I should be able to get this pretty.
Yes?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh God. So the only thing is I'm 1 level away from Symbiote, which is where Ultimate Evolutions really get their power, because otherwise they're very, very weak. They die very quickly.
We've almost got it, Sergeant Hammer. Please. You're just stressing us out.
Okay, if I can just get close and not stand in the fire.
I was told this one would be easy.
I'm a known liar.
There we go. Okay, we better get down there.
Back to the base. Oh, the other one's already also spawned.
Yeah. Yeah, we gotta
hoof it. I also made the mistake of going Ravager against evasive maneuvers, which is not a good option.
Yeah, you know, in theory it seems like it would be really good, but yeah, the evasive maneuvers really get you.
Yeah, especially when that's your one option against Sky Terran.
I don't have my fancy healing carriers yet either.
No, but you do have call downs, and that's all you need.
We might just lose, you know?
We might. I might have egg on my face. Cut that whole first section, please.
And I'm just like, let's talk about StarCraft lore. And here we're just going to lose the mission.
My fortress can't take much more punishment.
Aren't you all glad to have me back?
Protection assured.
Yeah, I might just go with a.
Put your harvesters.
I told them earlier that I wasn't good at the game anymore. That's what if the YouTube commenters say you're not good at the game, you're not good at the game.
Why aren't you Giant Grant Games? Why can't you solo this for me? It doesn't help that I'm not, I admit I'm not a particularly great Abathur, so I vastly underestimate it.
I just get irritated with Abathur, to be honest. That's why I don't like playing him.
If you know what you're doing, he was considered the best in the game before the Prestige came out and Alarak bulldozed everything, but
right.
he's still really good.
Okay, I'm just leaving.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I'm gonna try a commander I'm better at.
I said we were going to keep things interesting. It's not fun if you just smash through them every time, right? Well,
that's
it's fun
true.
for me because I don't want to have to replay this for like 2 hours every week.
Yes,
But
then we can have our nice podcast.
exactly.
Can ramble about. Yeah, Mass Recall's pretty much the one thing going on.
Going
They did.
Tychus.
Yeah, I'll go Tychus. I don't feel like microing or dealing with running around them.
I'm not changing.
No,
I'm
that
committed.
makes sense. Yeah, you weren't the problem. You were doing some pretty good work against those waves. I kept losing my stuff, and it was a bad comp for me.
Yeah, I agree. That was just a generally bad comp. Like what I typically as Karax, I would probably just make just a billion reconstructing Sentinels and then maybe a couple Fire Colossi. But Terran Air, not great for that.
Terran Air's just there's never a good time for Terran Air.
That was actually a great comp for the mutation in general.
Yeah, with evasive.
Right. At least the
Was-
Vikings don't do splash damage.
God, yeah. The Liberators are, of course, rather annoying.
Yeah. And now we'll just get explosive threats or something. You know,
Oh, of course.
everyone's favorite.
Well, glad to see you two could make it. Been fighting these Void Thrashers for a couple of days now.
Anyways,
So you're all-
A lot of good men.
So y'all are on Legacy of the Void now, co-op?
yeah. So we started. We got it. We played the prologue and we played the first 3, and
Jump
it's a
on
lot different. And that's because the Madness modifier where we're supposed to take 50% increased damage is broken.
One of them now.
So for now, it'll be fixed next week. I'm almost certain
Oh
of it.
no.
Yeah.
Try get a quick one in before they fix it. Just
Well, we
try
got
to
through the
flat-
first 3 maps, which are arguably worse because you have no tools.
Yeah, it was funny. Artosis was doing a playthrough of normal Legacy of the Void campaign because he'd never done it, and he got stumped on that first map and died a bunch of times and gave up.
On normal?
No, on brutal, but just not co-op version is what I meant. The regular.
Yeah, but I understand. You know, and this is something that I talk about a lot. We actually talked about it on stream yesterday, but I try to bring up all the time is it's easy to forget what the first time you play a lot of this stuff is like. Like,
yeah.
you know, StarCraft 2's too easy. Brood War, too easy. We need all these ultra hard variants. And a lot of people don't think that, like, a lot of the audience plays the campaign once and never does again. Like, there's a group of people out there that not that you have to, like, cater to casuals per se, but, like, understand, just be aware that you are catering to, like, the elite, as it were, of players. But those are the only people that you interact with, so you think that that's most of the fan base or most of the player base, but it's not.
As a hardcore casual, I really think they should cater to me.
I watched a good Game Maker's Toolkit about this earlier in the week, but it's just... Again, I just think that because, like, we hang out on these Discords specifically about these games that we've been playing forever, you know, we forget that, like, Legacy of the Void on Brutal, even Heart of the Swarm on Brutal, was not, like, particularly easy the first time you play it. But yeah, after you know where everything's happening on each individual map, it certainly seems much easier.
And once you know, like, the ins and outs of each unit, which was a big... When I first played it, I actually got stuck for a while, and I was playing on hard, on Wreck Shear. Like, that mission just I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And that was because I kept building destroyers, and destroyers are bad.
They are, but it's absolutely true. Like, you don't really know what each unit does. Like, Vanguards are incredible and destroyers are bad. When you look at those units on paper, you wouldn't think that until you use them enough. And frankly, there just aren't enough missions in the campaign.
And you remember the launch too. Everyone was saying that destroyers are a god tier. It's Splash Void Rays, and I think you remember too because you kind of mentioned it in your video on it. Everyone thought the last level of the initial Legacy of the Void campaign was like impossible on Brutal.
It's true. I think a lot of people. I mean, again, it's interesting. It depends on where you expose yourself to these opinions. Like, if you just go on a general gaming forum, most people just think that real-time strategy in general is an inaccessible gaming genre to them. Just completely. And that's not even, you know, talking about, like, hard difficulties within them. I just think that's crazy.
Yeah, it's like people think, it's the thing for the hardcore gamer. Like, you, yeah, and you talk to people in the community, it's like, I don't even play the campaign. I just do versus forever. So you get the impression that, oh, this wasn't made for me.
Right. And I think in a way that sort of, it iterated, the genre iterated itself away, like into MOBAs, which I think were considered much more accessible, especially because they sort of piloted the free-to-play model as well, which is a separate accessibility thing. But I think that it's hard because, again, we think about real-time strategy like, do we appease the current audience? But the current audience has pushed away many audiences such that it's not going to grow. Like, you have to think about different ways to, I guess, make it clear that, like, hey, these games aren't nightmares to play like you might think.
Oh, I don't know if you've been following the Frost Giant. Thank you. I got that justice. I don't know if you've been following the Frost Giant development, and they're talking about these exact issues of, hey, like, where's the line between making a game accessible and losing its core identity?
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Well, I guess they should hire us because we're talking about these things.
Maybe when they get story writers, I'll be their lore guide. No, they're in good hands with their writing. They got an old StarCraft alum.
I love the Frost Giant subreddit, by the way. I love it because it's where you can go to see the most crackpot potpourri ideas. Like, everyone's a game developer here. I get that impression, and I really enjoy it because you just see some of the weirdest stuff.
I appreciate, and because a lot of them came from the game community, that they opened up the idea of, like, well, everyone should have. I want to hear everyone's opinion on, like, what we should do with an RTS game. The problem is, like, everyone with a soapbox isn't necessarily everyone's good ideas.
Right. And I would include myself in that. It's more just like, I understand, like, there are realities of game development that you have to healthily work within. That it's not just like, you can't just, it's like, if we had unlimited time and money, then we could do all this stuff. Like, yeah, all developers know that, but they don't have those things. So.
Also, if you asked me what I wanted and told me to lay it out, I would want another StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
So, like, the game I've been playing lately is Phantasmaphobia, and I would not have thought that, like, the game I'd be playing a bunch during quarantine is some, like, horror co-op game. Users don't know what they, like, want until they have it, and then they become experts on why it works.
That is a really, that's a very concise way to put it. And then especially the part where suddenly everyone becomes an expert after it's happened, after someone else has given it to them. But prior to that, it was more just like them describing why the last thing worked and why they need more of that.
Well, it's like how everyone, and I especially because I've been trying to give a lot of feedback on the, like, story and campaign elements, because I think I know a decent bit about it, but even I'm like, oh yeah, I've become such an expert in, like, what StarCraft 2 could have done better after it's done. But I'm trying to imagine writing it from scratch, and, like, yeah, it's a lot harder. Hindsight's a lot better than than trying to make something new.
Yeah, and to be fair, I sound like I'm just like, get off my lawn, like I'm harping on anybody who wants to try to be creative. Which I think that's important because you can get some really interesting ideas. Again, the important thing is, being able to then take those ideas and, as I said, like, healthily engage with the way that the realities of the industry, just like within the current system. It's finding that, and that's what, like, Frost Giant actually has to do, is take all these crazy ideas that people, and they're also going to get a vastly different ideas of, like, oh, well, we should, we should make it hero-focused. We shouldn't make it hero-focused. We need a really simple economy. We need a really complex economy. Like, you're not going to get a straight answer on any of these. You're not going to have a community agreement on any of this stuff.
And depending on the community you listen to, like, there was a big thing where Tasteless went to them and tried to get feedback on the idea of a campaign should prepare you better for versus. And as a largely campaign player, that idea is like, please no.
Yeah,
I have no interest
stop
in
it.
versus.
Yeah.
I would rather a campaign's entire focus be, like, if there's ever a decision between making a mechanic that is fun or making a mechanic that helps with versus, fun should win 300% of the time.
Right. And honestly, like, the StarCraft 2 campaign prepares you just fine to start versus. I think, again, it's like kind of the challenge of remembering what it was like entering.
Right, yeah.
It teaches you how to click things, to build things, to have an economy for things. Just because it doesn't tell you the exact same units is fine.
And it's the tough thing, too, because, like, and it's been I tried to bring up, like, once you start having a versus balance, do you then change the balance of the campaign? Because Reapers and Wings of
Yes.
Liberty were entirely different than Reapers are in current iteration and have a completely different role.
Yeah.
So
That's
how
a
do you
really,
deal with
yeah.
that?
That's a really good point.
So I don't know. I'm interested. It's going to be a few years, but there's a lot of cool ex-Blizzard stuff on the horizon.
Yeah. Warping guys right in on top of the fire.
Hey. Okay, I'm microing up through a bunch of fire. This is much smoother now. I can micro a bit, not have a big blob of roaches.
God, I feel like whenever I go on rants, it's just me. Oh god, oh my god, God tier. They stasised me on the fire.
Hey.
It's just me doing the well actually internet meme, and I don't want to be that guy.
My entire life is one big well actually meme.
It just makes me sad that I feel like that's what I've become.
No, there's an element of it, like you, especially with as long as that's not everything you become. Like you said, it's not a bad thing to like try to correct misconceptions, like point out. I wouldn't say hypocrisy, but like you get what I mean.
Yeah, I feel like, admittedly, like when I do it, I feel like I'm like telling a straw man person, like, this is why you don't understand the reality of stuff, right? And that's exactly.
Yeah. And everyone sounds great in their head when, like, you definitely we all fall into the same kind of tropes that we.
Yep.
Like I complain about people complaining about the story when that's most of what I do.
Yeah, and to be fair, I honestly think that not all, but most conversation, especially between strangers people, is exactly that. It's just sort of like finding ways to feel kind of like superior and like kind of dunk on people for like, oh well, you don't know what I know, so
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, these void rays that are blinking around. I'm glad that you're able to basically just solo this. I've got some units, but...
No, you're good. I forgot that your auto heal mechanical does stuff to Cirrus, which is super nice.
Oh, nice. I guess that just having the awareness that it can be an insufferable personality trait is decent.
I mean, that's most of, like, I think that's the biggest thing you can have is self-awareness. You are not, nobody's a perfect person. You are not immune to the traits that you dislike.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just recognizing that.
Especially not being able to use infestors properly in the 3-player co-op part of the Swarm campaign.
Oh, yeah.
That's possibly the biggest flaw. To some folks, you'd think that they're about to have an aneurysm.
Oh god, I say that. I have to say, like, even I sometimes fall in the trap of like getting frustrated when I see someone else on stream like do stuff, and now trying to talk and do this at the same time. I've talked about it before. This is a lot harder than just playing normally, guys.
Sometimes, well, that's the thing. I mean, you can get mad. I get mad at myself sometimes. Like I skim my footage to make sure like it's not busted. And yeah, like sometimes there's something right in front of me and I'm like talking about like, oh, why can't I find this thing? And it's right there. Like, and then watching the video, I see it, but playing it, you just don't.
I mean, there's a reason that the Miss Tome meme is a thing.
Yeah. I've gotten better with tomes. I feel like I've gotten, I don't know, I've gotten better and worse in some ways when it comes to just like playing the game. Like I definitely rely a lot more on brute force macro than more meticulous micro, because it's more muscle memory to just spam out a bunch of units than it is to.
Yeah. And it was interesting as a kid. Like I had no concept of macro, and the micro missions were always what I liked. But now as an adult, that tends to be the opposite. Where once you get in the macro routine, especially after you played a little bit of versus,
yeah,
it's a lot easier.
Well, and then StarCraft 2 added timers, and then I'm like, how dare they? You know, like now I feel pressured.
Yeah,
Like,
that was a big complaint, and I to an extent I get it. I would have liked some macro like pure punt, blow up the map levels, but a lot of people did complain that there weren't like. I don't miss the amount of them that there used to be. Of just there's a base, here's your base, go wild.
I mean, I mean, the Reckoning kind of functioned as that. It's more just like.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I don't think that the time maps were as they didn't add nearly as much pressure as people seemed to think originally.
Right.
But like when I played it the first time, I was like, oh my god, this is awful. But you always have so much more time than you might imagine, and I actually think that. Like, what would you do differently if you can't beat it in that time frame? I guess you just turtle and then build capital ships and move out, like we all played StarCraft the very first time, I suppose.
And I, if I recall, and I have to look up to see if I'm just not imagining this because there's a few interviews I've imagined, but that was actually something you wanted to avoid because a lot of levels did come down to turtle up, maybe take a base, get a 200 supply of a capital ship, and you win.
Yeah.
And obviously there was differences in that, but yeah, once you figured out the macro routine, it just became a little easy. So they wanted to kind of mitigate that, help with like give diverse unit choices to beat a level, that kind of stuff.
Well, like each map now has sort of a theme, and even though it became more repetitive in Legacy of the Void specifically, which was like move out and destroy some vague object on the map, right? The theme was more around the aesthetic of the map or like the units that you got versus the enemy composition to kind of highlight what new unit you were getting.
Yeah. I always had the feeling with Legacy, a big problem apparently in both Wings and Heart was there was a lot of the story had to bend around the level design they came up with, or they had to like shoehorn it in. Like Supernova is a good example of that. They had this idea for a firewall map, and they're like, okay, how do we do this?
Right.
I have the feeling with Legacy, they wanted to like take the complaints that the story was kind of weak and not have the gameplay interfere with that. That's my theory. I have nothing to back that up. But
and to be fair, I think so. I don't know if this is considered controversial or not. Everyone's got like some you're how could you possibly think that's good opinion, but like I thought Legacy of the Void was probably the strongest of all the entries.
I 100%, and I know the epilogue's controversial, but the core campaign I thought was actually like I really liked the circular nature of it. Start on Ire, have a bunch of like loose victories that end up costing a lot, climax in Olar, fight your way back to Ire. Like I thought that was a very cool circular, like you get depowered and fight your way back kind of idea.
Exactly. People talk about like show gameplay, use gameplay to tell a story, which is very hard to do in real-time strategy. And then they also simultaneously, strawman person, will talk about how like, oh, first mission was just F2, haha, it's Protoss. But no, the whole point is it's showing you at the height of your power, and then it's immediately taken away from you. That's the whole point. It's storytelling.
When it launched, there were actually articles praising that level, which I found interesting from like actual media outlets, which is fun to see.
I mean, it also functioned as a good level to market the game on because it was a visual spectacle by having all the cool Protoss units and just blasting all these Zerg. Like it was neat.
The odd thing I've noticed, and you mentioned that you like a lot of people think Legacy's the worst. I think Wings was the worst, but I know that's controversial.
I agree. No, I agree with you.
Is I've noticed that people who were introduced to the campaign through StarCraft, like just by two, started with Wings, tend to hate Legacy the most because it feels most disconnected, while people who started with Brood War tend to like Legacy most because it felt like it continued that story. Especially because you
More
see
than the other
Artanis.
two. Yeah.
Yeah. You see Artanis exactly once if you've only played StarCraft 2, before he's like the main character. Whereas Brood War, you know him super well and you get to hang out with him, all that.
Well, yeah, and again, because there was such a big gap, they kind of had to refresh the storytelling, and I think with Wings, I was a little disappointed that, like, the last thing I cared about at the end of Brood War was, like, oh, Jim's got a revolution against Arcturus, and that was, 90% of Wings of Liberty.
Yeah. I think the issue was making the emotional, for me, and I know it's been harped on a million years, but it made the emotional crux of the story the romance, which, of course, like, in an RTS is a strange choice. But the last we see of Jim was, like, and I'm sure, everyone's harped on this, but I think it's was when Kerrigan kills Phoenix, and then they don't mention Phoenix there's not a single mention of him through the entirety of Wings of Liberty. Where it's like, if this is going to be your emotional crux, like what you rely on, I don't even mind if it's the crux, but like it just felt like they pressed the reset button on that whole thing.
Yeah, well, I think that unfortunately happens when there are decently long gaps between games.
Yeah,
in that way,
and the funny thing,
like it's an entire refresh.
And the funny thing is, it was kind of a George Lucas syndrome of Metzen was the original writer, and there were a few other ones, but he was like the core one. And so it's like, well, we keep his vision because he obviously had this idea going through, and yeah, very much a George Lucas syndrome.
The example I use too is like when games have DLC or expansion packs where it feels like the first 10% of the expansion pack is like, here's all these new mechanics that we added because this was like paid DLC, right? So we like revamped something, and rather than it being like a continuation of exactly where you were, and like the difficulty matches the end of the game where you left off and then continues going up, instead like we're just introducing these new mechanics and it feels like you're starting over. And then maybe by the end of it, you can take some of this cool stuff back to the main campaign. That's how a lot of DLC feels. And the whole point is, though, that disconnect between going from the main world into the DLC is a strange jump because it feels like you're just starting a whole new game as opposed to something that's already in the game you're in. And that's like how I would compare it to like a storyline as well. Whereas like I look at Doom Eternal, anyone who's familiar, the DLC, the first mission, the difficulty, it's as if you just like you ended the main game and you went on to the next level. Right? There's no like, oh wait, but here's a new type of gun and here's like some simple combat arenas where you can like learn how to use your new gun. No, it was just like boom, you're in, you've got all your weaponry, you've got everything you had right where you left off, and it just got harder. And I feel like that's how I think a lot of people want sequels to be. But the problem in terms of like making money is you kind of need to do a soft refresh to make sure that anybody new coming in isn't totally lost.
Right, and that's actually like looking at that now. Tychus, they had a proxy in Tychus of like, hey, he hasn't seen anything that's going on. You could bounce the old story off him. But yeah, I feel like it's and the only way to really do that is to kind of plan it out from the beginning, which is hard when you have a big video game franchise that like, I don't know. Yeah, it's the element of you should plan it all out, but also get it done quickly so story ideas don't like fall out of style or something. I don't know.
I just think it was unfortunately always kind of on the back burner as well because of the genre. Is very difficult, which is a shame because I think a lot of people were enraptured into StarCraft originally because of even if it was kind of like tape and strings, it was sort of revolutionary for the time, being able to tell any sort of story like in the map. Suddenly there's transmissions happening. Like it's very quaint now, but that didn't really exist before then.
I still stand by that it's a good video game story that holds up. There's issues, of course, but like every video games tend to not be like there's a low bar with video games, and I think it clears it pretty well. Yeah. One anyway. Two you can argue with me on now.
Well, for the most part, video games are WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. Like there's some games that try to be a bit more subversive in like having a theme, a bit more like metaphoric storytelling, and most games like they want to, they're going to sell you the game, and most people aren't buying the game to be told like this, wacky story. Whereas I do think a lot of people who were carrying over into StarCraft 2 wanted something that was probably even more story focused than what we got.
Oh yeah, I mean, I did. I was sad when they stopped doing mission packs because that was my thing.
That would have been
and
nice.
Like, I think now we're only now raising our standards that a video game story can be really good. Like there's a lot of very good narrative focused games that come out because like anything else, gaming is just a medium for whatever you want to do. You can have a competitive game, you can have some deep story experience, some stupid Fall Guys kind of thing. Like
there's so many options. Yeah, you don't have to just do one thing.
Right. And Blizzard kind of made its name almost doing a little bit of everything in that regard, like story, competitiveness, zany little custom maps, make your own kind of stuff. Like, yeah. So I feel like there's a lot of balls in the air. That's a thing Frost Giant's going to have to kind of overcome is every community is going to want their thing to have the same level of polish.
Right. Yeah, I'm very curious to see. Very curious to see what they kind of land on and how much of an emphasis is going to be on the competitive side of things. Because I don't know, I kind of think like if you have a competitive scene, if you have a game that can support a competitive scene, you should probably just kind of let it go and see if it organically grows, and if it catches on, then put some money into it and develop it. I just don't think that it's worth dumping a bunch of money on top of it right away.
We're learning now with Overwatch League, and so there's doom and gloom about it, but I think it's obviously a lot better than people are making it out to be, but it still was a massive investment. I don't think it's hitting where they want to for how
Overwatch
much Blizzard's
League?
dumped in.
Yeah.
Overwatch League, and Hearthstone's another good example. There's been a lot of people want the esport community, but they want it now, and StarCraft was in a weird place where they just kind of let it go. Like Brood War just was natural. Like they didn't start it; it just happened.
I guess my
for better or
question is
worse.
like, what audience was saying we want an esports community per se? Because I feel like any amateurs can play and make their matches public, and like you don't need a developer supported or a publisher supported esports scene for it to grow and get invited to third party tournaments and such.
I think the worry is that if there's no infrastructure, people won't come in and invest their lives into play. Because like to be a pro gamer, you basically have to invest your life into it.
Yeah.
And if there's no guarantee that you're going to get anything out of it, no fame, no money, like no glory, then they're just like, okay, well, why bother? Like this, because most of them don't do it. I'm sure it starts doing it for fun and then it grows into an esports scene. But I know there's almost an expectation of an esports scene out the gate anymore.
I agree that we're in different times and there does need to be some initial investment, but I would also argue that in the past, I think some of the biggest competitive scenes that we have seen were not made with esports in mind, and the pros grew out of the game being popular and fun, as opposed to being told like this needs to have an esports scene and we have sponsors.
And League and a lot of the biggest ones, honestly, like Fortnite or God, what's the new one? There was a new game that got an esports scene that I'm still shocked by, but Fortnite's the biggest one. Of just the reason it has an esports scene is because so many people play it. That's
yes,
it.
Yeah,
and it's got a massive one, like huge following, but it's because it's a fun game that people like to play. Somebody in the comments is going to tell me I'm wrong. I've never actually played it. I played PUBG back in the day.
It's fun.
But...
I mean, if you like that kind of game, it's definitely fun. I mean, I think just the fact that tons and tons of people play it means it absolutely is fun.
Oh yeah, exactly. And the fact that so many people play it and there's so much big investment into it, that's enough to get an esports scene, and a pretty big one at that. I got in as the cool uncle when I gave my nephew V-Bucks for Christmas. Or no, yeah, I think it was Christmas. So I'm the hip uncle.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, yeah,
Fortnite.
You know what the kids actually want. That's a good. Well, don't take that out of context. But you know what Christmas gifts kids actually want.
I'm not that old fogey yet. I play a game that's 20 years old.
I guess it's interesting. I guess the main takeaway I come away with this, based on what you said, is now that I look back, maybe StarCraft 2 is an example of a game that tried to do too much. Even though, the thing is, it did accomplish a lot of it because it still has such longevity to it. It still has so many people playing it and interested in it that it clearly has accomplished that. But I wonder if maybe it could have afforded to pretty much focus solely on the campaign instead of, again, such a hyper focus on esports, which it accomplished at first and then started to dwindle. And instead of smashing as much money into that as possible, maybe focused more on what was getting people to buy the game, which were the campaigns.
If you look at the outside perspective, and obviously internally, StarCraft's always doing great, and I do think that some of it might be a little overstated, but externally to a lot of other scenes, StarCraft is seen as a bit of a cautionary tale of developer meddling in terms of it. It was huge. It's the reason Twitch exists, because they wanted to make a StarCraft platform. That's kind of why Twitch tends to
TV.
Yep, and that's the reason that they tend to support it as much as they can, because there's that little bit of legacy to it. But because there was a low patches, some elements of the tournament scene, like Korean dominance for a while, even though the game didn't really necessarily take off in Korea like they wanted it to, it was seen as a bit of what could have been. It's And I think largely what undid quote unquote StarCraft was the rise of League, which there wasn't really a way to stop that. The MOBA genre came out of nowhere, and it's still going strong. So
Yeah, it's interesting to think that there was not any industry reaction to these custom maps that had so many players. I'm actually shocked.
well, no one thought of the idea of that it would take off at that big, and then Blizzard would have let it completely slip through their fingers. The fact that they facilitated the biggest game on Earth, but they didn't see a cent out of it. Hence the whole Dota lawsuit, and why Heroes of the Storm is what it is, or named what it is anyway. It was going to be Blizzard Dota back in the day.
Interesting times. I guess topics for the future as well. But this was
Yeah.
fun.
I enjoyed it. We'll probably be back next week. These early mutations are fairly, well, I say
lost.
this with 2 tries. Fairly easy when I don't try to play a commander I'm really bad at.
Well, I would rather play a few times because we're less focused because we're talking about something interesting than just blasting through it mindlessly and then ending, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure the viewers find it more interesting than
I hope so.
just going Tychus. But I'll try to use this to boost my prestige, and if we start messing up, I'll switch to one of my A move heroes or commanders.
Likewise. Yeah, I'm playing with that. I have so many that I'm trying to work through. It's crazy.
I'm blasting through them now. I've got most of the ones I care about, but I think I mentioned I'm doing I use a dice basically to decide who to do next. So, Abathur's up.
Good luck.
Yep. Now, good luck to you too. There's a lot of them.
Well, we're happy to hear from you in the comments. Well, I am at least. I can't speak for you. But if you want to talk about this stuff, I will talk with you in the comments about any of the topics we're talking about today. And we'll be back next week for maybe another easy mutation, or maybe not, and we'll lose a bunch of times. It's really exciting.
Don't speak to me.
Ever.
No, yeah, ever. So yeah, okay, yeah. Next week, hopefully an easy one. I feel I have egg on my face after this one, so I'm not gonna underestimate them again.
Sounds good. Okay, well, we'll talk to everyone next week. Peace.
Bye.